Well, welcome everyone. Just fired this up here. I see everyone's filtering in. We have quite a few participants tonight, so I'm going to wait for the number to go up a little bit higher for everyone to take their seats and grab a drink here, hopefully after dinner. I'm just going to take a moment before I introduce John and get started here. So. For those of you just joining, I'm going to give a few minutes for everyone to hop on here. I know we have quite a few more people signed up that are on right now, so I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes to get started. So, thanks. All right, well, it's about 6:35 here, so in the interest of time, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, including John's here. I'll get started. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Dave Stewart, Athletic Director with the Winter Sports Club. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time tonight to join us on this beautiful evening. I wish we were all in person at Olympian Hall, and we'll be back to that soon enough, but Zoom will have to work for now. I'm really psyched to introduce John O'Sullivan tonight. He's the founder of Change the Game Project, which focuses on educating around athlete-centered coaching and team culture. He's a club soccer coach, former NCAA coach, and a dad, a sport dad as well. And he's worked in club, NCAA, professional teams through Changing the Game Project together with Jerry Lynch. He's also presented to US Ski and Snowboard, where a lot of our coaches have seen him as well. Many of our coaches have attended his coaching conferences over the years down in Denver, and also attended his online courses this spring as well. John stepped up and offered a virtual course in place of his annual conference, and we had a number of our coaches who coach all your kids join that back in the spring. So thanks for doing that, John. I really find John's message valuable because he speaks really fluently about the value of sport in every kid's development. But I think for us at the Winter Sports Club, also about how to combine athlete-centered coaching with high performance. And that's a tough thing to combine, right? That's what we're all about, is champions on and off the mountain, combining that development of the person with progression towards the elite level as well. So that's something that John really can speak to from an educated way. We have a lot of folks on this Zoom and joining. So if people have questions, please just write them in the chat and I can unmute you and bring you in, and you can ask those directly of John as we go along. And we'd like to reserve some time for question and answer at the end as well. So with that, I won't take up any more time, and I'd like to introduce John O'Sullivan. John, take it away.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you all for making the time tonight. I know we're all a little teched out these days. If you're like me, like Dave mentioned, I am a dad. I have a middle schooler and a high school freshman who are both in full-time online school right now. No one here in Bend, Oregon, where I live, has gone back to school. So my kids are full-time online. My son's finishing a science project. I think I've secured enough bandwidth to make this happen here tonight. But I've demanded that I got the bandwidth at 5:30. So we'll see what happens. As Dave said, I wish I was there in person with you. I think it was about 3 years ago or so was the first time I came out to Steamboat to work with the Winter Sports Club and the soccer club as part of a fundraising event for my lifelong friend, Julie Warnke, who's a middle school teacher there in Steamboat, and a fundraiser for her late son's scholarship fund. And so had an amazing time there with all of you, lots of sports together. I think we were in the middle school or the high school cafeteria for that talk. But yeah, as Dave mentioned, then I've done a lot of work with your coaching staff since then. And it's just great to be here with all of you tonight. I won't make you stare at my ugly face most of the time here. I do have a little bit of a presentation that I want to talk about, but as Dave mentioned, anywhere along, if you have a question, please ask it. That's the best time to ask it, when it's relevant, when we're talking about the stuff in the moment. And then, of course, at the end, if you have a question there at the end too, we'll try to work with those as well. So that's right at least on my screen. It's at the bottom. There's Q&A, and there's also a chat function there as well. So I'm going to share my screen with you and see if tech will work. And perfect. There you go. So here we go. So what I want to talk about with you all tonight is how can we as parents help our children do the best in all their sports. And certainly here we're talking about the upcoming Winter Sports Club season, and whether you have skiers or Nordic skiers or jumpers or anything in between, freestyle, whatever it is, math students, artists, everything that we're talking about here tonight is really about how do we support our children in any achievement activity. Because if we push a couple of the right buttons and do a couple of the right things and step back at a couple of the right moments, good things happen. And so I wanted to start with this we call this the performance equation. A man named Tim Galway wrote a book, I think in the late 70s, called The Inner Game of Tennis. And he said this, that performance is potential minus interference. So how someone performs in any activity is their potential. And what's their potential? That's their genetics. That's their hours of practice. That's their the quality of coaching they've had. That's everything that they're capable of, minus the things that interfere with it, minus the things that chip away at it. And I think as a young coach, certainly, I always thought about potential as something that was there. And the more that I layered on, the more likely it was to come out. And I remember when I read The Inner Game of Tennis first, and I said, what if my job as a coach, and now today, what if my job as a parent is to strip stuff away? And the more that I can strip away that interferes with performance, the more likely that their potential will shine through. And one of the things that I've done with Change the Game project is really taken this deep dive into, well, what does elite level performance look like? How do we perform our best? And what's really interesting is, on one side, you have, here's what all the research says in sports science and skill acquisition and child social emotional development. And on the other side, you sort of have, this is what popular culture says. And so what I want to kind of do today is maybe help dispel a few of those myths for you so that we can support our alders, and it's, I think, relevant for this. And so I was watching this interview with Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, founder of Amazon. And in this interview, they asked him, um, hey, everyone, am I back?
Yeah, John, I can hear you now. We lost your audio and video there for a moment.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just all shut off there for a second. So let me go back to screen share here. And where'd you lose me at? And I'll start from there.
It was probably about a minute and a half ago, John.
Minute and a half ago. Okay. Well, I know I was on this slide because it hadn't moved forward yet.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. So sorry about that, everyone.
All good.
Just know that within that minute and a half, I was yelling at my children in case someone was online. So feel better about that. Sorry about that. Okay. So did I start my Jeff Bezos story, or should I start that again, Dave?
Just before that, John. Just before Jeff Bezos.
Perfect.
20, 30 seconds. Yep.
So here we go. So I was listening to this interview with Jeff Bezos, and Jeff Bezos, obviously CEO of Amazon. And what they said to Jeff Bezos, what they asked him was, what does Amazon do to predict what business is going to be like 10 years from now? How is the world going to evolve? And what's going to be different? And how do you predict what's going to be different? And Jeff Bezos said something really interesting. He said, a lot of people ask me that question, but it's not really the right question. The question that people should ask me, and the one that they never do, is what's not going to be different, Jeff? Because if we know what's going to be the same 10 years from now as it is today, then we can put our people and our time and our money towards that. And if we invest in those things, then whatever changes, it's going to be okay. He said, so, what is Amazon known for today? We have big selection, and we have low prices, and we have fast delivery. And he said, I can't imagine a world 10 years from now when people would say, Jeff, you have a huge selection, but your prices are too low. Or Jeff, hey, love that low prices, but, I ordered it and it showed up 2 hours later. Can you slow it down? And so what he said is, well, if we know that those things aren't going to change, then we can invest in those things. And I think what we've seen with Amazon's great success now is that over the last number of years, they've invested in more warehouses, more shipping hubs. And I'm not going to get into a discussion of whether Amazon is good or bad or anything like that, but they've certainly, from a business standpoint, been successful by focusing on what are the things that they're known for and being really good at those. And so when it comes to sports, right? I think it's really important to think about what are the things that aren't going to change in sports, because certainly we can spend a lot of time thinking about how is ski technology going to change, or how is strength and conditioning going to change, or all this sort of stuff. But I think deep down, really at the core of it, is this focus on three things that I don't think change, that they're the same thing that when many of you were growing up, and they're the same thing for kids today, and they're going to be the same thing for your kids. And what that is really three things that I think if we explore today and we keep in the back of our mind throughout this, we can have this great partnership between parents and coaches and the club working together. And so three things that don't change, right? Why kids ski, what they want from their coaches, and that, right, kids have parents, and parents are something that we always have to spend our time working with to engage. Now, still today, as Dave mentioned, I coach a 13-year-old soccer team, or two of them, and I have lots of parents. And last night we did an online presentation for a bunch of parents of talented young players, of what their next steps might look like living in Bend, Oregon. It's that constant outreach and engagement and filling the knowledge gap that's really important. So let's explore this. So, from the first part, really understanding, why do kids ski, right? What puts them there? And I think what's really important to remember is this idea of understanding what path your kids are on. Now, I think there's two pathways in sports: the performance pathway, or maybe this high performance pathway, and then a participation pathway. And I think everyone enters sport on that participation pathway. I've never met a 5-year-old who's like, "Coach, I'm here to grind today. Like, let's go." Right? So everyone comes in, and then at different times, depending on the child, some slide into the performance pathway, and some stay on a participation pathway longer. And some sports require earlier movement onto that performance pathway, while others can allow multi-sport participation in a lot of things for a little longer, and not necessarily acquire the number of hours of practice for really, really young kids. But I think really looking at our kids and understanding that just because my oldest is on this pathway doesn't mean my middle child or my youngest child might be on the same exact pathway at the same exact age. So this is really, really important, again, to keep in the back of our mind. So then when we look at all the research that's ever been done about children in sport, and then we ask, well, why do you play, or why do you ski? It always comes down to one thing, and that's fun. Or fun is the word that kids use, and the word that I like to use is enjoyment. It comes down to enjoyment and understanding really what is enjoyment. Now, I think as an adult, sometimes when we hear kids say fun, what we think is, the slappy clappy fooling around, let's just play tag and not work hard. But actually, when children talk about what makes sports fun, that's not what they talk about. And so the latest research was a woman named Amanda Visick from George Washington University. And she asked this huge group of kids, age 8 to 18, why do you play? And they said fun. And so what was interesting about her research was she was the first one who said, okay, well, let's dive into fun. What do you mean by fun? And kids came up with 81 characteristics of fun. And here's the top 6. Trying your best. When a coach treats a player with respect, getting playing time, or getting to participate in, whatever the competition is. Team dynamics, right? Getting along with your teammates, exercising, and being active. These were the top 6. So really what it comes down to is ideas of they like working hard and competing. They like positive team dynamics, and they like positive coaching. That's what makes sport more fun. And then farther down the list, you had things like winning and playing in tournaments and, all the travel and dead last taking team pictures, right? And I remember this really hit home for me with my own daughter when she was about 10 or 11. We were in Portland, Oregon, playing at her first sort of, travel soccer tournament. And her team was very, very bad. And I'm sitting there on the sideline as a dad watching this game that they're losing 9 or 10-0. And all I'm thinking to myself is, my poor daughter's going to be miserable at the end of this. This is terrible. what am I going to say to her? And so the game ends, and me and the other parents kind of meet the kids halfway across the field and walk over. And I say, "Hey, Mag, how you doing?" And she looks at me and she goes, "Dad, the hotel has a pool. The hotel has a pool." Right. And that's always stuck in my head of, yeah, we lost, but the hotel has a pool. Right. And we're ready to move on. So I think this is really, really important, that the pathway to excellence isn't about win every race or win every event that you enroll in. It's understanding sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. There's other interesting research with kids in sports, and they ask them, would you rather be on a team that wins every game 10-0 or wins this week 3-2 and then next week loses 3-2? And almost every kid will say, I'd like to be on the 3-2 team, because that's how they set it up in recess. That's how they set it up in pickup. So understanding that, especially in skiing and ski racing, where, your starting position might really affect your ability to win a race because the course is a mess or the course conditions have changed or things like that. Focusing just on did you win or how many points did you accumulate isn't always the thing that keeps the focus on the enjoyment aspect. Okay. Now, one of the things that I think we should remember is that there's a difference between enjoyment and pleasure. And one of those things is, I always use the example of a marathon. Now, I've run one marathon in my life, the Chicago Marathon, and mile 20 through 26, there was zero pleasure. Right? Zero pleasure. It was miserable. I had pain everywhere in my body, but you can still enjoy running while not having pleasure in the moment. And so we want our kids to enjoy their winter sports while at the same time working hard that in the moment of this dry land training or in the moment of learning something difficult and new, it might not be all that pleasurable, but they still want to come back the next day. And that's the art of coaching, and that's the art of parenting, to help them see in this difficult time what's good about this and what can I control in this situation. Okay. So I see a couple comments, Dave. I don't know if any of them are questions or just from when I disappeared before. Okay. Bezos story, reading your tennis book. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So, okay. So then there is, this other interesting research right here. And I was telling Dave about this, and I told him I wanted to bring this up because if there's one thing when we talk about all kids, they can't be serious about anything today. They don't do anything. Well, one thing that I don't know any parent has ever told me, oh yes, I'm begging my kid to play more video games. Right? No one ever says that. So there is something out there today that kids do without being told, and they do a heck of a lot of it, and they challenge themselves, and they go through these processes of getting better, and that's video games. And so I'm actually enrolled in this webinar next week from a researcher in Canada, who Nicole Lazzaro, who has done a lot of this work. And what Nicole says, which is really interesting, is as sports have gone down the path of technical training and focusing on winning, gaming has really focused on deep engagement, the social and emotional things that make people come back and do something more and more and more. Now, I'm not saying that sport and video gaming are exactly alike, but the reason that I'm interested in this area is because we can learn from video games. And what Lazzaro has found in her research is that video gamers focus on 4 types of fun, right? Hard fun, which is the challenge and triumph. So that's someone trying to level up in a game, and they're pushing and they're pushing and they're trying, and then they get it and their arms go up in the air and they cheer and they scream because they finally accomplished something, right? There's easy fun. That's just repetition of something that's not so challenging, and it's about excuse me, curiosity and creativity and things like that. This might be the Minecraft type fun or along those games. there's serious fun, relaxation and excitement. And then there's people fun, that online connection and collaboration and competition. And so she has this sort of map of these different types of fun. And as you look at them, we can learn from sports. So when I first came across her research, I recognized in my own coaching that when I focus only on the hard fun piece, right, that you can't have that hard fun, that excitement of accomplishing something without frustration first. And I have to be very aware of, if that frustration gets too high, right, then kids sometimes can switch off. The beauty of video games is when they can't necessarily level up, sometimes they can take a step back, right? People fun, that online collaboration. Well, certainly us in sports, even in an individual sport like skiing, the team matters, the social bonding matters, the connection of individuals matters. And so I work very hard to find the right balance of always have people fun, always have these positive team dynamics, right? Having that serious fun of just, that gets them in the flow state and play a lot. Sometimes backing it off and making it, easier, creating space for creativity, and having the place that, man, it's hard, but when we get this, it's going to feel really good. So, like I said, this is not my area of expertise, but I thought this was a really interesting way as a parent and as a coach to think about enjoyment and think about fun. So a question came in there. Scott says, can I share my slides with the participants? Of course, Scott, no problem. I will send them to Dave when we're done here in a PDF. So no problem at all. All right. So, okay. Number 2. Oh, and before I go on, if anyone else has any questions there, please let me know. It's more fun when you're talking and asking questions than when it's just me. But as I move on, right, please in the chat or the Q&A, either one, list the 5 qualities of the best coach you ever had, right, growing up, or maybe the best teacher that you ever had, because this is going to drive deep engagement as well as great coaching. And this is something that I think it's important that all of us understand, that we've been working on that this connection between my organization and the Winter Sports Club that's been going on for a number of years has been very, very deep in terms of the amount of coaches that have gone through our coaching education programs, that have talked about leadership, that have talked about culture building, have talked about behavior change and shaping behavior and how important that is. So if you get a sec, just go to that chat box and please list some of the qualities of the best coach that you've ever had, because I want to explore this with you as parents, because I think it's very, very important that we understand that these are some of the things that we're asking our steamboat coaches to exemplify. And sometimes we see these qualities and we think, oh my God, my kid's not getting better because that coach is doing this or doing that. And I want to really take a deep dive on that. So please put some in there. All right. So Scott writes, fun to be around. And Dave, if you want to throw out a couple of your ideas or maybe some of the things that the coaches talked about the other night. Dave writes, they cared about me as a person before the athlete. So this is a huge one, right? They coach the person, not the sport. And when the athlete feels valued as the human being, then the athlete performs their best. All right, John made me feel like their favorite, and finding later that all my teammates thought the same. I love that one, John. That's fantastic, right? Man, the art of great coaching is that every kid feels like, wow, I'm coach's favorite. I'm the best, right? Scott, team cohesiveness. So there's that team dynamics, knowledgeable coaches, personal approach to each athlete. Michelle, understanding what uniquely drives each child to that fun. Yes, exactly. So how much can we get to know the individual, and how much can we, do we work with the team? I know as a young coach, I spent a lot of time thinking about, um, one size fits all approach to this. And if you didn't get my way, then there was the highway. Karen, pushed me harder than I thought I could go, technically very competent. Exactly. So, Karen, that's a really important point, that when we're talking about great coaching, we're never talking about not being demanding, but what we are talking about is don't be demeaning and pretend it's being demanding. And I see a lot of coaches who cross that line. They attack the human being. They insult, they use a lot of sarcasm in their coaching. They do all these sort of things that sometimes, oh, I'm just being tough on them. And it's no, you're being demeaning to them. Being tough is saying, I think you can do that better. Being tough is say, let's do one more. Being tough is saying, I don't think you're showing me your best effort or your best focus. That's being demanding, right? But being demeaning is very different. Demonstrates different approaches to the player and finds one that works. Fun, encouraging role model, walk the talk, used humor, good listener, fun, not too serious, believes in me, doesn't compare me to others, communicates well. Taught me to take pride in hard work and recognize the accomplishment. Willingness, creativity to explain things in different ways. Just because it's presented doesn't mean it's learned. I have a great example. I wasn't going to bring this up, but there's a coach who has attended every one of our conferences, and he's a ice hockey coach in Connecticut. And I'm going to dig out this email that he sent today to me, because he sent it to Jerry and I, and it was just awesome. And this was, he coaches 12-year-old hockey players. And he said this was his exchange with one of his players the other day. And he said, he usually in the locker room before and after would do a lot of this connection, but because of COVID, they can't be in the locker room. And so he's like, I've encouraged the players to offer their feedback in their message group. And here was his exchange. Player, very excited for practice tomorrow. Can't wait. Coach, me too. The coaches have been exchanging ideas. Joke, lots of pylons standing in line and long explanations. Player, haha, those are the best. Scrimmaging is so overrated. If that's how you feel, then definitely we'll play games. Can't have kids having fun. Kid writes, having fun is terrible. So they go on like that. And then the coach says, what did you like about Monday's practice? And the kid writes, I'll put them in order. Coach Dave's drill, because it helped our passing abilities. Coach Gabe's drill, it was the same as Coach Ed's, but we played this knockout in the beginning. Then Coach Ed's. Thanks for letting me know, my friend Carl writes. Any ideas to make them better? Maybe do this a little longer and add a scrimmage element to the end of this one. Thanks, I like your suggestions. Right? So that ownership of the whole process, what a wonderful thing that is. Right? That is what I think is great coaching. Not that the inmates run the asylum, but that the coaches listen and they give feedback and they take feedback and say, is this working? How can we make this better? I'm curious what you're seeing out there. I'm curious if you're enjoying this. So when I look at these things, it really fits into the research. This is the research around what the qualities of great coaches: respect and encouragement, positive role model, clear communication, knowledge of the game, knowledge of the sport, someone who listens, right? So important. And if we're in a room, and many of your coaches have been, when I asked this in a conference and asked you to list 5 things, what I would have done is I would have handed you all 5 sticky notes and say, write each one of those qualities, 1 per sticky note, and then let's put them up on the wall. And what you would have seen is that great coaching, 10% of those sticky notes would be on a wall that we might call knowledge of the sport. And the other 90% would be on what we would call connection. And so as coaches, we are relentless connectors. Coaching is a relationship game. Coaching is about people. And so many coaches for so long have been told that coaching is about technique and winning. But actually, the best coaches are ones who really are about the relationships. right? About that connection with athletes. I was working in Italy in December for a ski club over there, and it was myself and Richard Rokos, the University of Colorado head coach, and we were doing that together. And we were in a small group of there, and there was like 4 ex-Olympic skiers in the room who are now coaching over there. And we were talking about this, and I asked them, I said, "How many of you coaches have been invited to a significant life event of one of your players, like a graduation or a wedding?" And Richard said, I've been the minister of 10 of them, right? That's coaching. That's connection right there. So one of the things that we've been working on with the Steamboat coaches that I think is important to know and to understand is what we're asking from the coaches. And a couple of weeks ago, I was on with all your coaches, and we talked about these 2 acronyms. And I think what's really interesting is, as a parent, these same things that we're asking the coaches to use with the athletes, we can use with our own children. And I know I try to practice this every day, and I fail miserably quite often, especially now that I am a homeschool teacher and getting frustrated with the technology and the internet connection and my son or my daughter's misunderstanding of what's happening. But the one thing that we talk about is bathe them in the river. And what RIVER stands for is, if we can make our athletes feel relevant, right? That they matter, that they have an opinion, that they have a say. If we can make them feel important, right? That they have value to this group. If we can validate them and show that they have value to the group, and we can validate the things they say by, just like Coach Carl, taking their suggestions and maybe implementing them. Asking them, "Hey, I'm curious how you're feeling out there today. I'm curious what you were feeling or thinking that last run. You looked fantastic. I'm curious what you're feeling or thinking out there. It didn't seem like it was your day today." The E is empower them. So give them ownership of some of their choices. And the last one is, just respect them, right? That they're out there and they're competing and they're working really, really hard. So we talk to our coaches about bathing them in the river. And if you bathe your athletes in those things, then you strip away interference. And then we talk about loving our athletes, LUV. And that means listen, understand, and validate. So when we have a conversation with our kids about a sporting event, first, are we truly listening and paying attention to what they say, or are we just waiting to jump in and solve the problem? But if we can truly listen and we can ask questions, so that's understand, right? We can reach out to them and seek to understand what they're asking, right? And then validate, sort of sum it up and say, so I think I hear you, this is what you're saying in this moment. Am I correct? Yeah, Mom, you are. Yes, Dad, you are. That's the conversation that has real impact and power, because we've let them frame it for themselves. And every one of us as a parent with children in sports is going to have these important moments where we do have to love our athletes, right? We have to listen to them. We have to understand what they're trying to say. We have to validate that. And if we do those things, then they might ask, do you have any suggestions? Do you have any thoughts? But if we skip LUV and just start coaching our own kids, we just start giving advice, all of a sudden they start to lose ownership of this. And they don't get a deeper understanding. And sometimes we're sort of stealing the reps from them in terms of them trying to understand, well, what went wrong in that moment and how can I fix it and what do I need to work on? Okay. So these are some of the things that we've been talking to our coaches about. All right. Any chats here? Okay. I think we're good on that front. Perfect. Dave, anything to add about our work together before I move on?
No, I just wanted to add, having been to the conference last summer down in Denver, doing that exercise with the sticky notes, John, and not knowing where it's going and writing down those 5 attributes of your best coach, and then being told to go put them, the technical, tactical on one wall, and then the interpersonal on the other. that definitely got my attention. I think there are a number of people in the room having done this for the first time that definitely was eye-opening. And, I think it confirmed for me what good coaching is all about. But I think for some people, it's who have been told that it's all about the technical, tactical. That's really eye-opening on that side. So that's a powerful exercise. And I just wanted to second that and say that really hit home with a group of coaches. Room of 100 coaches. And I think it's happened every time you've done that, where it's about 80 or 90% interpersonal connection oriented and only 10 or 20% about the technical, tactical component.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, man. And I think the real big thing with that is, that's a great visual, but just think about that. And I think sometimes as a parent, we want our coaches, hey, you're here to teach the technical, tactical side of things. But, I've always loved this, this idea, right? No one cares how much you know till they know how much you care. And so the best coaches are relentless connectors and carers and trying to learn what everyone needs. We had Steve Kerr on our podcast, obviously Golden State Warriors coach, and 5 finals in a row, 3 championships. And he talked about one of the most important things he does as a coach is to understand what every player needs. And he said, I can't treat everyone the same. He said, when I look at Steph Curry, Steph has so many demands on his time. Everyone wants him for something, an interview, to endorse something, this or that. He said, the most important thing that I can do as a coach for Steph Curry is understand that he needs a safe, just a bubble to be a basketball player. And I have to get rid of those distractions. And if I can do that, I'll connect with him better. And he said, on the other hand, the 14th player on my bench who's in the last year of his contract, what's the biggest concern in his life? It's not people wanting to interview him. It's, is this my last contract? Am I going to be out of the game? All I know is basketball. He said, and if I try to treat him the same as I treat Steph, I can't do that. So I have to know what that athlete's needs are and how they're different and connect on that level. And so I hope you'll see your coaches doing that. And I also think that as a parent, if you're not understanding that there's the ability to have that question. Because I know sometimes I've had parents say to me, why aren't you pushing him harder? Why aren't you pushing her harder? And my response is, they're about to burst into tears. What am I going to say to them in this moment that it's not going to, if I'm pushing harder, I just need them to know that they are enough, that they're a human being and that's okay. And that we all have bad days. These have been my own kids in the car on the way home. This has been athletes who just, nothing about, 13-year-old boys who are growing fast. In 1 week, they lose complete control of their body and they're a completely different athlete. And getting through that's a tough time. I know it was for me. So I have to relentlessly sort of connect and understand them and say, hey, it's just a touch now, but you have great value to this team and you've made great improvements. So be patient. It's okay. We'll get through this. All right. And then, this last piece, and, God, this is years ago, that picture now, us and some friends, skiing here at Mount Bachelor with our kids when they were really young. And, one of the things that I think is really critical is this. My friend Sky says this, coaches have to stop using the bad parents as an excuse to ignore and not engage with the good ones, because 99% of parents are great. And we all love our kids. And some of us, we just have this fear that we might miss out or we might screw up. And we live in this day and age where, social media is just this constant influx of, look how great everyone else is doing. What's wrong with my DNA or what's wrong with my parenting? And I would say on the flip side of what Sky says there, right? Parents need to stop using the bad coaches as an excuse to ignore and not engage with the good ones, because there's some fantastic coaches out there and we need to be allies in this process. and coaches need to communicate, and parents need to communicate. And when something doesn't go right, can we seek to understand what happened in that moment before it gets posted on social media? Just here in Bend this week, I got an email from the principal of the middle school where my son goes yesterday, because there's a ton of parents making social media posts disparaging all the teachers who have basically been given 3 weeks to figure out how to engage in online classes and teach, 120 kids over the course of a week on a new platform that they never used before the end of this summer. And sometimes, just like this webinar just went out, the thing crashes, the system doesn't work, kids get booted off. And all these parents, instead of seeking to understand and have empathy for those teachers, have gone straight to social media to say what a disaster, what a joke they all are. And that doesn't make it any better for the kids. It doesn't make it any better for the educational thing. So we need to work together. And I can promise you, in working all over the world with so many sports organizations, that there's very few that I've worked with that are as passionate and dedicated to making their coaches better as the Winter Sports Club is. That for this last number of years we worked together, every one of these coaches that I've gotten to know is on the front lines raising their hand, how can I get better? Not how can I be perfect, but how can I get better? So living in Steamboat, you are in really, really good hands with a group of coaches and a group of leaders that are working super hard to make it better. And I'm not saying that because, they had me on here. I'm saying that because it's true. And if my kids wanted to be in a winter sports club and I lived in Steamboat, I would happily sign them up, because I think what you're doing there is a great thing. So work together, seek to understand, reach out to your leadership when you don't understand, and recognize that in this moment post-COVID, where there's weird stuff going on and in our kids' lives, school is different, social things are different. This ski season is going to be very, very different than anyone has ever been before. And probably more than ever, we need so much patience right now. Patience with our coaches, patience with parents, patience with our kids. That can we just take a deep breath and get back on the snow and be grateful for the things that we have, like this beautiful town and beautiful mountains, and we're going to get better. But by the same token, let's just be grateful that we're out here, because I know for me, if COVID has taught me anything, is how much I love watching my kids play, how much I love and missed that opportunity, how much I've loved the time off the road that's gotten me time to be home and watch my kids explore new things, right? They play soccer and my daughter plays volleyball. My son got way into, downhill mountain biking this summer, and my daughter has gotten very much into art and surfing. They built a surf wave in our river, and how much I've just enjoyed those things rather than worrying about, my goodness, we're missing out on soccer. My goodness, we're missing out on this. So this is going to be the winter of, I think, taking a deep breath and just, recognizing that we're all in uncharted water. And if we can be patient and we can be allies, we can make this a great experience moving forward. Okay. So I want to do some questions here at the end from anyone. You put them in there, but I also wanted to put up just my connection there. That's the website, changingthegameproject.com, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm not on there as much anymore after watching The Social Dilemma, but that's a whole new webinar right there. That email goes directly to me. So if you have questions out of tonight, you're welcome to email me directly. And then the book that I wrote for parents, Changing the Game, right there. If you do that text, I think the text still works, but online, if you go to changingthegameproject.com/free CTG book, you can download a PDF for free, and you can grab that and read it. And hopefully you'll find that helpful and a little deeper than we got in here. Okay. Dave, do we have any questions coming in here? The question
John,
box, I'm quiet.
I'm sure we do, and I've just unmuted everyone on here, so feel free to. I give you permission to unmute yourself, so feel free to hop on and ask a question with your voice here. I don't. We don't have too many people on that prevents it from being manageable there. But thank you so much, John. I really like the message here tonight. Obviously, 4 types of fun. Fun is one of our new core values for the Winter Sports Club. So defining that in that way really helps us share that message in a clear way. So thanks for that. I like that new one.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things is just this understanding that like fun, right? It's not something to be avoided. We did. I was saying we did this webinar for some of our younger players last night, and we had one of our former club players. She's a senior at Colorado College. She's the team captain of the women's soccer team there. And she was just talking about how important it was that playing soccer is still fun to her. And growing up in Bend, and she, pursued sort of like a regional team ODP experience, and then said, you know what, that's not for me chasing after this. Cause if I have to sit in the car that often, driving to Portland, driving everywhere, this is becoming unfun. And so she took a step back and followed her own path and still did fantastic, and still had a great high school career and a great college career. And again, the captain of a Division I soccer team. But by the same token, she kept her life in balance, and that was her path. And she talked about how some of her teammates, kind of were forced down this path that wasn't really the one they wanted. And by 16, they were done and they had walked away. And others, took the step back like she did, and they still loved it and they were still playing. And I think one of the beautiful thing about all these winter sports is that these are lifelong sports. And I get no greater joy than the ability to go up to the mountains with my own kids and ski with them, or snowboard with them, or, backcountry ski with them, make them go for a hike with me, do something. I love that more than anything else. And we would never want to jeopardize that or their love of snow sports, chasing after something that maybe they don't even want in the first place.
Great. Thanks, John. Are there some questions out there? Feel free to fire away.
Hi, John. My name's Artemis. I'm with Scott. And I have really appreciated the message that you've been sending. And the thing that I'm holding on to is that you encouraging dialogue between parents and coaches. And I'm curious about what you think the parents' responsibility is in that, and then also what the coach's responsibility is in that. Because I know as a parent, like, you want to stay in your lane, but you also want to be in partnership. So I just wondered if you had some ideas or clarity around that, just to encourage that dialogue.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and many layers. It's funny, in my new book there, I kind of wrote about that from a coach's perspective of how do we lay out sort of what is your lane early on, before the season starts, before there's emotional things. And so I think it's important that every coach and every club sort of lays those out depending upon the sport. And I think skiing or winter sports are even more unique because that level of trust has to be so high, because oftentimes our athletes might be traveling alone with the coach. And so that level of parent-coach interaction is probably at a far different level than it might be with me and my soccer team, because I don't take those kids on the road without their parents or anything like that. So, but I think, one thing that's really important is that we set parameters or guidelines around competition conversations. So my son, my daughter has a bad race. I don't want to run over to the coach on the snow and start yelling or screaming or saying, what the hell happened out there today? And so I usually set like a 24-hour rule that after a game or some sort of competition, 24 hours to cool down emotionally before we have a conversation about what's going on. Number two, and skiing's or snow sports are a little different in this. I set the guidelines that when we have a conversation, we're never talking about other kids, right? Like, yeah, of course, if there's some bullying behavior or hazing going on, then yes, I need to know about that. But we never talk about the technical, tactical performance aspects of other athletes in my conversation with you about your athlete. So that conversation is this opportunity to come together and talk about the path forward for our kids. Giving your coach insight into what's happening off the snow is a hugely important thing, because the things that happen at home, right? Maybe there's an illness in the family. Maybe there's stress because someone's lost a job. Maybe there's, relationship strife, whatever that is. Let's not think that that doesn't interfere with how a kid's going to be on the snow. And so letting your coaches understand this is what's happening in this moment gives them great insight into, okay, you know what? I got to back off Dave here for a moment, because I know he's going through a tough time, and maybe skiing is his one happy place right now. So the more information that you can give your coach, the better. And then respect them that, you know what, that they have kids and they have families and they need time off as well. And that, they might have 6 skiers or 8 skiers or 10 skiers or 20 skiers that they're dealing with. And so they can really only maybe give you 1/20th of their time. And then finally, I think sometimes you have to agree to disagree. I think certainly with our not the free skiing sports, but our timed sports, any time sport, the results kind of are the results for the most part. So we have to say, well, this is how you're skiing, this is how you're doing in there. Just ski faster and you'll move up the pecking order or whatever. But I think that trust and that belief that we're both in it for the same thing, which is to make this the best experience for our son or daughter. If we can start with that common ground and get to know each other and really truly respect each other and communicate well, that's the best way to do it. And in my experience doing this a lot of years, I've definitely had a few parents that we were never going to come to an agreement. And I've had parents that have pointed out things to me that, I hadn't noticed or I didn't know. And they've said in a respectful manner, I think you got it wrong on my son. I hope he proves you right. And they've been right. And I'll be the first to say, you know what, I'll fall on that sword. I screwed that one up. So that dialogue is important. And if you find that you can't have that dialogue, then maybe you bring in your program director or your age group director as sort of a third party intermediary. But the worst thing I can do as a coach is to have a complaint about me that I'm the last one to know. That breaks the trust. That makes me upset of like, wait, if there was a problem, why didn't you come to me? Why did you skip me and my boss and my boss's boss and go straight to the board member? What happened there? What happened to like, hey, just pick up the phone and call me? And so coaches have to build trust, but parents, we have to first go on the trust thing and say, we all have the same goal in mind, which is the best interest of the kids. Great question.
Thank you.
Any others out there? Please unmute yourself.
Hey, John, this is Tyler Shepard.
Hey, Tyler, how are you?
And program director, so I wear 2 hats.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get a little insight on the parent side. If you could talk a little bit about how, as a parent, we can support our kids finding more enjoyment. I think a lot of them find enjoyment in it, so I don't want to, put words in kids' mouths, but the process of getting better. You know, in an uncertain time right now where there's lots of committees right now working hard to put a new race calendar together. So there's still a lot of uncertainty that as a parent, and certainly as, you know, a person in my position, are trying to answer questions for parents, but trying to have conversations with the kids that, you know, the process of training and getting better can be just as fun and rewarding as the competition itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh no, yeah, for sure. And what's really interesting, on our podcast the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of really interesting athletes talk about that. Just on 2 days ago, we released one with a woman named Lakey Peterson, who's the #2 ranked women's surfer in the world. And she talked about the process and how, she burst upon the scene at 16 and, was the next great thing. And all of a sudden couldn't get over the hump and couldn't win it. And she's like, kind of lost sight of the process. And when it came to something like surfing, I was really good at the type of waves I grew up on, but I was not good in Tahiti. I was not good on this type of wave. I was not good on reef breaks. I was better on shore breaks and things like that. And how she had to embrace this process of overcoming her fear of the unknown. We also had a guy named Marty St. Louis who is an NHL Hall of Famer. And he had just this great quote. He said, if I could describe myself, I was just really good at getting better. He goes, I was better than almost anyone else at getting better. And so I think one of the things that we can do as parents is, it's hard for kids because all they have to do is turn on YouTube and see, Dude Perfect pull off the most miraculous trick shot thing we've ever seen. And what we didn't see is the 79 takes that didn't work before the one worked. So the more that we can introduce them to the athletes that share their struggles, that share the process, that share, overcoming anxiety, overcoming injuries, things like that, is absolutely critical. So whether that be biographies, whether that be documentaries about the athletes, we have this role of introducing them to the things that happen when the lights aren't on, when the cameras aren't on. And I think that's, Tyler, that's one of like the best things that we can do as a parent is say, Messi's not that good because he just showed up there. Messi was the guy who stayed after practice every day getting better. So, help shine the spotlight on that for them with athletes that they know and look up to and respect. And hopefully they'll embrace it as well. But certainly high performance only comes with embracing that journey, embracing the process and falling in love with sort of, those moments when no one's watching. And a lot of athletes don't like that. And, early on, maybe they shine bright because they're big and strong and fast and they can get away with it. But I don't think anyone here is going to make the argument that you can get away with it forever, because it just doesn't work like that.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. I hope that answered your question, Tyler. I'm not sure if it did or not. Anyone else out there? I hope you'll all take the moment and download the book. Really what I kind of laid out in the book is sort of these, what I call the 7 C's of this high performing mindset. And if you can make sure those things are working well together, good things happen. So the 7 C's are common sense and perspective from us as parents, the right conditions. So that's, physical and long-term athlete development conditions, but emotional, that it's safe, all that. Good communication. I wrote a chapter on communication with my friend who's a hostage negotiator. So that's a pretty interesting one. Control and ownership. We've talked a lot about competence. So developing the skills, which then breeds confidence. And then helps them take over, more control, and then just caring and unconditional love, right? And if all those things work together, then your son or daughter is going to perform usually to the best of their potential. So please grab a copy. Don't tell the publisher.
And also for parents, I have a number of these copies of the book in my office. So if there are any parents who want to swing by the club and pick one up, just shoot me an email and I can get some of those to you to lend those out. I'd be more than happy to get those in some more parents' hands.
Perfect. Anyone else? Dave, anything else from you? Any last questions that you have?
No, just thank you, John. I know you have practice coming up here this evening, so I want to be respectful of your time and also of all of our parents who are doing double duty as teachers and parents these days with some online schooling here in combination with in-person. So, but a big thank you to all of our parents who took the time to join us here. I have recorded this presentation. I'll post it to our website. So you'll have access to this to refer back to. I'd love to have some more conversations about John's presentation and this topic offline with any parents as well. So feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to keep this conversation moving forward. So again, thank you very much, John. Thanks for the time here. Have a great practice tonight, and we'll do some more conversations with you down the road.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a great ski season. And I hope next time we get to do this in person, because Steamboat's one of my favorite places to be.
We'd love to have you back.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Thank you.